Wikispeed, Lynnwood, Washington, United States, June 16th, 2016. I'm here with Ryan Gelzer. As he solders up that joint, I'll pan over what we got done. So we have these two Harbor Freight double-sided bin racks, which are unstable and warping out under themselves when loaded with nuts and bolts. So we may actually replace those with something more industrial. But what Ryan did is label 3/8 24 thread, which is a standard bolt that we used to use for everything. Now we use much more metric, but he listed them in order. So 1/2 inch long, 3/4 inch long, 1 inch long, etc., all the way through. And then there are lock nuts, not lock nuts, large diameter washers or fender washers, and then small diameter, 1 inch outer diameter washers, etc., and then overstock on the bottom. So this whole side is 3/8 24 thread washers, which we've done before, but they'd gotten mixed. Then this side, 1/4 inch 28 thread, and it's all 1/4 inch 28 thread in order, which we almost don't use anymore, but at least the stock's in order. Then what I've taken on is metric only. Problem is, I've realized we have a huge variety of metric from working with Honda engines and some Honda suspension parts. They don't standardize on just one diameter and only a few lengths. They use many different thread pitches of the same diameter and many different lengths of both. So if the top row, which it is right now, is M10 by 1.25 thread pitch, starting at 15 millimeter, I run out of the row before I even run out of each length they use. The second row is then M10 by 1.5 thread pitch, and then getting longer, and I have some room. And then M12 by 1.25, and then M12 by 1.5. And then into M14, and I even have them mixed. I have 2 thread pitches of M14 in the same row. Well, on the other side, I started to put M6 and M8, but I realized we've got a small quantity of many different metric thread pitches just from working with Honda parts. They apparently haven't standardized. And it looks like we're going to need, if we're going to have a row per thread pitch, we need at least 16 rows. And if we're going to have a column per potential length, it could be over 24 columns. So I'd need a much larger grid if I'm going to have an individual bin for each. So I love that we've standardized on the parts that we use. If you look at the car, any module we use uses very few diameters. They all used to be 3/8 24 thread, and we use just a few lengths. And now the newest ones are all just M10 1.5 thread pitch by either 35 millimeter or by 140 millimeter, and that's all. But when we use a Honda engine, there's a lot of other parts we need to have. So that was step 1, and that's still in progress. So the Imperial, as far as the parts we use, is fully sorted. The metric is not. I think we're going to need a lot more bins, a lot more bins. Now what Ryan's taken on is a further iteration of the gauge cluster wiring harness extensions. I'm going to film over his shoulder. He's wiring up weather pack wire extensions. He's soldering them directly onto the Honda OEM engine wiring harness. This branches, I think there's 16 wires, to the gauge cluster, which will mount up on the dash, and has mounted before, but this is another iteration yet again. The wiring harness itself is being very carefully stood on, the wiring harness extension. I should probably drape that somewhere more securely and put a loam over it for protection. But here's one of the problems. The OEM Honda wiring harness going to the gauge cluster uses 2 of the same wire colors. So for example, there are 2 browns, and there's 2 whites, and there's 2 of every color. Now knowing which is going to be difficult. We're going to have to troubleshoot because we didn't flag, or the interns that were doing it, who were awesome, didn't know to flag each wire on each end before they cut, not realizing there'd be duplicate colors. So we'll do the coolest we can. There might be some troubleshooting. But that's what we've got. Dr. Gelzer, for this soldering step, any tips you'd give to someone in the world who was doing this work in their own Wikispeed shop?
I know I keep forgetting to put the shrink wrap on, so
Yeah, the heat shrink.
yeah. No, I think it's really hard to hold both wires in place when you're soldering them. So I've been trying to cluster one group of them up together and push them into the other one so that they at least hold on when you're soldering. But yeah.
Got it. And for the bolt sorting, what seemed to help make that smoother or more fun?
We decided to go for uniform colors for the different kinds of bolts, so that we've got all of the 3/8 bolts with blue and all of the 1/4-inch bolts with red. So color coding makes things easier to find.
That's a true fact. All right, that's what we were able to do. High fives, buddy.